Thank you for coming down. I just have a few questions to ask you. Well, Travis, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah, it's great having you. I know we had kind of connected through the internet, through social media, and it's great to actually sit down and talk with you. I think that you've got a great story that people are going to definitely enjoy. Let me ask you, I like to ask some get to know you questions of everybody. Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee, without a doubt.
Good. That's the right answer. You'd be amazed how many times I don't get that answer, but that is the right answer.
I work for an international company now, and we've got a sales office out of UK. And any time that I interact with them, I ask them if they brought some tea from England for me. And the very first time that they answered, and they're like, "Yeah, we've got some tea for you." Good. I'm like, "Good," because I got a harbor to dump it in.
That is the right answer. I couldn't agree with you more. Guy. In fact, I say that all the time when, because everyone, doctors or whatever, you got to drink more tea, more green tea. It's like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure we threw that in the harbor and that's done with. Of course, I also say the world didn't begin before 1776. So, each to their own.
That's year zero, isn't it?
I thought so, but some people are confused on that.
Okay. Well, flat earthers probably.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Where's your favorite place to have that drink of coffee?
If I could, it would be on Huntington Beach Pier. Second favorite place would be in my office chair here at home.
Very good. And I've heard that. So I've never been to California. I've never even been to the West Coast. I've made it about as far as Texas and Wyoming. That's as far as I've made it. So why Huntington Beach? What makes that place so special?
The scenery.
Okay.
It's gorgeous out there. You've got Ruby's Diner at the end of the pier. So you walk out this several 100-foot pier all the way out. So you're in the middle of the ocean and you're at a old classic 50s diner out there. And it's great. You've got the cool ocean breeze. There'll be people fishing. You can see some sea lions and sometimes even some dolphins underneath the pier. It's fantastic.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds like quite an experience. Do you have a best or worst travel story? And I know you were in the military, which we'll get to, so that definitely counts as well.
I've got a whole bunch of worst travel stories. Best travel story. Yeah, coming back from Iraq, still in my full desert camis. It got into Dallas, Fort Worth, and I was going to be flying from Dallas up to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then I got that golden bump up into first class, and I don't think I made it 2 hours before I was 3 sheets to the wind.
I'm sure.
Then another time we landed in Shannon, Ireland, the entire plane full of troops, and we had about a 4-hour layover, I think, as they refueled from Shannon back to the U.S. And they let us at it, and they said, open bar, go for it. And as we got up to the bar, there was a gentleman there, and he threw his credit card down on the table and said, "These gentlemen drink for free." And we drank Guinness until I don't think I ever wanted to drink Guinness ever again.
That sounds like a good time, though, at least at the time. I don't know about drinking that much Guinness, but
when you're young, you can handle it.
Yes. Well, we were all young once. So, do you have a favorite nonfiction book? And it can be fiction if not, but.
You just brought it up. We were young once. We Were Soldiers by Lieutenant General Hal Moore. So yeah, we were soldiers and young. That combined with any type of leadership book, the iceberg is melting right now. And I forgot the author, but it's talking about organizational change and leadership and how change can be scary in an organization. So those would probably be my two favorite nonfiction. Fiction, I just typically don't have time to read into that. So
Yeah, no, I get it. And no, that's why I always ask the question with nonfiction, because I'm kind of in the same boat.
yeah.
So yeah, you know, that's really true when it comes to leadership and stuff, talking about change. I mean, I think 2020 is going to be a pivotal year for those who can change and who look at business and life and everything in a different way.
You know, it was a huge motivation for me. I mean, I'm thankfully in an extremely secure position. I will always be considered an essential worker, working in line with the DoD, the defense market. I'm in the right country to be in that. I mean, we always have an amazing defense budget. The business is there, but what happens after? You know, for some of my fellow brothers in blue, what happens when you're out of law enforcement? That transition out, 2020 should be a eye opener for a lot of people that might be right on that verge of retirement. What are you going to do afterwards? And for me, you know, picking up this entrepreneurial effort was 2020 was the big motivation for it, because I didn't want my safety and security to be controlled by anybody else. I wanted to make sure that I was creating my own safety and security financially.
That's great. So let's go down that road of a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your journey, who you are, what you've done, what brings you to this moment right here.
Sure. I was born and raised in northern Wisconsin, up near about an hour away from Duluth, Superior area. So almost as far north in Wisconsin as you can get. So where the cheese is fresh and, you know, grass is green for a month and cold the rest of the year. When I was 17, I enlisted. I did a delayed entry program. So I enlisted July 1st, 2001. So 2 months before September 11th. So I'd already sworn in. I was a senior in high school at the time. And when I watched the second plane fly into the World Trade Center, and I knew right away that, you know, things were going to change. I wasn't going to just be going to military and going to college. It was, you know, our generation was going to be going to war, and sure enough, we've been at war for the last 19 years. From there, I ended up spending a total of 12 years. Was field artillery primarily. As I went to Arizona, well, I deployed to Iraq 2003, 2004. Got back, deployed to Arizona on the Southwest Border Mission from 2005 to 2006. And then immediately after that, I was hired by a sheriff's office in Nogales, Arizona, so Santa Cruz County, Arizona, and was a deputy sheriff there for just under 10 years. After my departure from law enforcement, I moved to Orange County, California. Right now, full-time, I'm working for a company called MilDef. We make rugged computers, laptops, a little bit above and beyond what you would typically see in a patrol car. These are definitely more in line for what our military forces are going to be using. So extreme rugged computers.
Right.
And then 2 months ago, I started my own company in which I hand make different types of shaving soaps and sell other shaving supplies.
Very cool. Well, let's go back a little bit to your time as a deputy. What different roles and stuff did you hold at the sheriff's office?
Yeah, so I was, I think, the last person that was hired straight from the streets to deputy. Now they're doing pretty much, you have to start out as a detention officer and work your way up.
I'm hearing that more and more at your smaller sheriff's offices.
Yeah. So I got lucky. Started straight off as a deputy. Went to the academy, January 4th, 2008. Hit the streets 5 months later, and I was on patrol for the first 4 years. It was good. It was an eye-opening experience. Obviously, I'm whiter than Wonder Bread, and I was in a predominantly Hispanic community. It was about 95% Hispanic, so picked up Spanish really quick, to the point where I am bilingual now. And about
That's great.
2010, 2010, I applied for a DARE officer position. We're one of the few agencies that still have the DARE program, and they still have it to this day. So I ended up teaching the DARE program for almost 5 years. And from the only reason I got out of it was because I ended up promoting up to patrol sergeant. So I went back out onto the streets, and I was there for just under a year.
Very cool. You mentioned Nogales, and I know absolutely nothing about that area of the country, except that Nogales is in a song by a guy named Bryn Hill, who's a Western singer. And it's called Highway to Nogales, and he talks about all the drugs running up and down that road. Is that pretty accurate depiction?
Yeah, it was always interesting. You'd go and I don't know what you call it, but we call it code 6. You went to go do a traffic stop. You flipped on your lights, and the vehicle would start to pull over, and you'd see bodies just flying out trying to run away. We called it a UDA grenade, and undocumented aliens. So all these aliens are flying from the vehicle, and you don't even know where to start with it. There'd be other times where you would walk up, and just as you're starting to walk up to the vehicle would take off in a pursuit. I mean, we had very, very frequent failure to yields pursuits out there, and the smuggling in the area. It's almost a part of life. It just happens. I mean, when you're that close to the border, you're going to have the undocumented immigrants. You're going to have the drug smuggling. So yeah, it's definitely there.
In such a prolific area for drug trafficking and undocumented individuals coming across the border and so forth. What was your guys' pursuit policy like? Were you guys able to pursue vehicles just on what would be traffic charge? Because the only thing known to you at that time would be traffic charges.
Yeah, a lot would depend. I mean, you can figure it out pretty quickly. I mean, especially geographically where you're at. I mean, if you were a mile off of the physical border and you had a vehicle take off like that, there's a reasonableness that there's a felony at hand with it, whether it's drug smuggling or something else. But yeah, the traffic stop just in and of itself, no, let it go. But, if we had walked up to the vehicle and we had that overwhelming scent of marijuana, possession of marijuana, even in a small amount in Arizona, still is a felony. Yeah, that was usually enough for us to go ahead and chase after it.
Very cool. Very interesting. So your time in law enforcement, I know we were talking a little bit beforehand, and you were talking about how this job can affect you and how it can affect you mentally and how it can wear on you. Go in a little bit, what was kind of the eye-opening moment for you? How did you see that, and what did it mean to you?
As I mentioned, I'm, combat veteran. I was out in Iraq, really at the beginning of it, Operation Iraqi Freedom 2-3 timeframe. When you get back and you demobilize, there's yellow ribbon events, and there's all of these processes and procedures and support networks to help our soldiers, and it's obviously well needed, and it's still not enough. There's a great need to keep addressing the mental health issues of our soldiers. But as I got into law enforcement, and right away you recognize that it's very much a paramilitary type of an organization. Absolutely. The rank, the structure. And as you start experiencing these things, it doesn't take you more than a couple days as a law enforcement officer before you see your first real, what the hell moment. For some people, it might be some deceased body of sorts. It might have to be, dealing with childhood victims or whatever it is, but you're subjected to different stressors. And these stresses can be very similar, if not equivalent, or sometimes even exceed the stresses that our soldiers deal with. I mean, when I was in Iraq, I took IEDs. We took, I think it was a total of 6,400 indirect mortar rounds out there. I mean, you have this combat, but you expect that. And you're in the military, you train for it, you're in the combat zone. It's something that you're on alert for. Whereas in law enforcement, you don't expect every single traffic stop that it's going to result in shots fired. You don't expect, as you're going and on a welfare check in a house and you come around the corner and you see somebody that's blown their head off. You don't plan or you don't expect that your best friend or your field training officer is just not going to make it home, and you're going to get that call that they had been killed in the line of duty. So there's different experiences and traumas, and so yeah, I think for the mental health side of things, this is a grossly underserved and underaddressed problem right now. Is that we have people that spend 20 years essentially in a war zone. I don't care if it's a small town agency or if it's Chicago PD. You're dealing with things if you're in law enforcement, and people aren't meant to keep that bottled up for 20 years.
You're absolutely right. And I think, like you said, it really doesn't matter whether you're in a large agency or small agency. The only thing that may differ there is the quantity. Like the quantity of homicides you'll probably see in South Chicago is obviously different than a small jurisdiction outside of that. But you're absolutely right. Why do you think it is not addressed more? Why do you think law enforcement doesn't address it in the same way the military does?
Well, I think maybe this is that good conversation, given the time and what's going on right now in this world, that it needs to be addressed. It hasn't been addressed for one reason or another. Maybe it is because of pride. To say a law enforcement officer is not filled with pride is a blatant lie. And to admit that, hey, I've got an issue or there's some things going on in my head right now, not everything is okay. I think every single officer is afraid to be immediately put on the rubber gun squad. They're afraid that they're going to be put into administrative duties. They're going to be taken off the street and their careers are going to be ruined. And the same thing was happening in the military. It took executive orders and all these rules and changes to come down through the Department of Defense side to say it's okay to ask for help. Generals had to be called in to tell the forces that it is okay, your career's not going to be ruined, nothing's going to happen to you. We want you to get the help, you need to get the help, and you're going to return to your job just as normal. Well, now you've got all of these fragmented departments, throughout the entire country, something like 3,000 different law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, something in that area.
And they're all independent chains of command. So you don't have this, joint Jesus staff that can come down with these directives on it. You've got all of these separate agencies that are responsible for their own troops. So until you got something that can actually, some legislation that can say our officers need this help, we're not going to see any of this change. I mean, there's just not the resources for it.
Yeah, no, you're right. And sadly, I've seen, and there, to be clear and to be fair, there are some agencies that are taking it on themselves and doing a great job with it. I've personally seen that, and some of them are doing great. But then there are also those that, just like you said, if they bring it up, there's a stigma attached to it, and they may be lucky to keep their job at the end.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, that was it.
Oh, okay. So you had mentioned something in there, and you can go as far into this or not as you want, but you had said that within the law enforcement profession, it's not normal to, lose your FTO. What you were referring to there, were you a trainee at the time?
I wasn't a trainee. This was just shortly after I had departed law enforcement. I had just moved to California, and I had called back to talk to one of my friends, and it was just a pure, a friendly call. And it happened to be, a couple minutes after the incident happened, in which my former field training officer had been shot and killed. So it was, I had been disconnected and slightly severed from the law enforcement community at that point. But, one of my best friends had just been murdered. And now it was a weird position because you don't know if you're still inside of that thin blue line or what's going to happen with it. But, at the end of the day, Chewy was one of my best friends. So we packed up almost as quick as we could to come back. A week later, they ended up having his services for it. And, you know, it was a good reaffirmation that, you know, the thin blue line definitely extends past your career as well too.
Yeah. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think that it highlights something that people don't forget, that like what we actually deal with. I mean, we talk a lot about the deaths we see, we talk a lot about the tragedies we see, but there's also that lingering fact that we lose officers also, officers that are doing the right thing, and situations occur and we lose men and women who pay the ultimate price, just like in the service.
Yep.
So yeah, it's, when it comes to the mental health aspect, it's such an important thing that has to be dealt with.
Yeah, without a doubt. And if, you know, if I could have my voice heard up into, you know, the national federal levels, this is what needs to start happening is, you know, if we're going to be looking at for some effective changes in law enforcement, you know, it's not a defunding effort. It's not taking away money from law enforcement. There might be some readjustments of where the money is spent and what efforts we're taking, but a focus in on our officers and the mental health of our officers is extremely important.
So if I'm understanding you, just to, because I like to offer solutions, so I like that. Would you say it needs to be dealt with at the legislative level, at the federal legislation?
Yeah, that's the only way that there's going to be any effective way of dealing with it. Waiting or leaving things for individual states can't be happening. There needs to be some meaningful nationwide changes in how our law enforcement officers are able to seek out help. You know, I went to Sweden at the beginning of 2020 before coronavirus broke out, and it was amazing to see. And I got to speak with a couple of their law enforcement officers. First off, they're not out in public like we are. You just don't see them. I had to actively hunt down a law enforcement officer to say, hey, I'm a former cop from America. How are you doing? And their methods of dealing with things are complete. They're almost like firefighters out there, where they just sit there and they wait for something to happen and then they go.
Okay.
You know, they're playing Xbox and eating lunch with each other in the meantime.
That would be a firefighter, yes.
But the mental health side was extremely interesting. When something tragic happens, and it's going to happen, they will all immediately stop what they're doing. They will have replacements come in and cover their shifts and deal with their shifts, and they'll go through a period of, you know, readjustment, and they're not immediately hitting that street the very next day. You know, I don't know how many times where I came home, you know, uniform bloodied up and beaten up and bruised up, and you take that uniform off, throw it in the wash, and the next morning you're checking 10-8 again.
Yeah.
You know, there's no break for any of this. And then with how much our officers are pushing because of how underpaid they are, I'm imagining a lot of these guys, they're running themselves dry on overtime and everything else. They're not taking the vacations that their body really needs. And, you know, the mental health is paying a price for it.
You're absolutely right. And they're picking up extra duties and everything else to pay. Early on, when I started this interview show, I interviewed a guy with Extra Duty Solutions, Rich Milliman, who runs programs for different agencies and so forth from the outside. And that's exactly what we were discussing, is how, you know, these young guys come in, and like you said, if it's a smaller agency, depending on what they're being paid, they may have to work ridiculous amounts of hours just to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And so then you've got guys that are going out to seeing something that's mentally going to be with them. And it should, you know, we have to, so often we want to take the badge and take the humanity and separate them. And you can't do that. We are human. And at our core, you know, we're going to go out to these scenes and we're going to react to it within the levels of our training, but from a human standpoint. Mm-hmm. And these guys go out and they see something. And sometimes these are young guys too. They're in their early 20s. I talked about before, but I'm fortunate I came into this in my 30s. So I was a little bit older, a little bit more life experience. They still have effect on me just like it would, but I can't even imagine being 19, 20 years old and going out to some of these scenes and then going that night and working some extra duties, coming in the next day, mm-hmm. No decompression, no vacations, no really other things going on in their life. And unfortunately, I think we see the tragedy of what happens over time and throughout that career.
Right. You know, they you can hear right away the statistics for soldier suicides. I mean, it's 22 a day. I mean, there's support groups and there's advocacies, everything else. But I'm worried. I could, if it hasn't already, I could absolutely see where law enforcement suicide can surpass that. You know, especially with what's going on right now. For the officers that are still 10-8, if they're putting the badge on right now, there's no shame in going out and getting some help.
Right.
You know, especially right now. But yeah, that's it. You know, just seeing the news, I mean, do I miss law enforcement? Yeah, but would I go back into law enforcement right now? No.
Yeah, more and more people are saying that, and well-known officers. I mentioned it also a few times. Are coming out and they're leaving the profession. Guys that
Mike
could.
the cop.
Yeah, that's the one I was actually referring to, and he's right. And as we keep going down this defund the police movement, and we go down this trying to take away things like qualified immunity, that so many people in the public don't even understand what that is and the importance of it, you're going to see more and more tenured cops leave this profession. And then what's going to happen is all these problems are going to be exacerbated because you're losing the guys with life experience, with experience on the job, that you're going to lose the ones that are in a position they can leave.
I think they saw something very similar in some of our federal agencies. Border Patrol, there ended up becoming such a huge void and a hiring need in 2005, 2006. That's why I was sent to Arizona with the military. They ended up having to recruit so heavily that they ended up lowering the standards. And that's what my biggest worry is that we're going to have such a negative or such a void for law enforcement officers that, you know, they're going to have to start looking at, well, who's willing to put on the badge at this point? You know, when you beat down the heroes enough, you know, who's going to rise to the occasion?
Yeah. You know, with voices, and I also like to point out that, at least in my opinion, I don't have a lot of statistical data to back this up, but based on what I'm seeing, it seems like it's a small group of people that have a very loud voice right now that's very negative towards law enforcement. The vast majority of the people I see anecdotally, people I talk to, not just on here, obviously, because this is law enforcement related, but in the public in general, have a very positive view of law enforcement and really support our men and women that are out there. But what do we do to change the culture, to not silence, but to maybe suppress or to be louder than these voices that are out there that are speaking so negatively about our brothers and sisters in blue?
Well, I think what's happening, and you're seeing these Portlands, you're seeing the and not to push this into a political conversation, because we could definitely go down that rabbit hole, but out of respect for what needs to happen here, I'm going to avoid that. But the minority that's screaming the loudest with it has to be ignored. I think we can say unanimously, and even after the body camera footage was recently released, law enforcement unanimously has said what happened in Minneapolis was wrong.
Right.
Nobody has defended this officer, even after seeing the body camera footage. We're like, okay, well, we knew that there was a backstory with it, but we still think that we still know that things were wrong. But we can't pander and we can't cater to the extremists in the situation.
Yeah.
We need to stop giving them the attention. We need to stop letting and it's not even a rational group. These are extremists. These are anarchists that are trying to completely shake apart our law enforcement. These are people that want to be able to go out there and commit crimes without the fear of law enforcement. That's the only reason that they're doing this. I think that the people that want to see the meaningful changes, that's our silent majority here.
Yeah.
Sure, there are people that are upset with what happened, but to cater and to pander to these extremists out there, it can't happen. It shouldn't happen. And I think our law enforcement officers need to realize that, yes, it's a silent majority that are still backing and supporting you. But, you know, something needs somebody needs to wake up and say, we're going to stop letting this Portland stuff happen. We're going to stop letting our law enforcement officers be run under the bus anytime somebody makes a mistake, because the thin blue line doesn't represent anything negative. I mean, it's the separation of good and evil. It's the line of people that are willing to create that barrier between good and evil. And it's meant to be a support network for these people on the front line. And to say that there's anything negative, if there's, I don't know, I'm getting.
No, I love what you're
about
saying,
it, but
Travis. I absolutely love it. And to me, that's exactly why, because I get a little kickback. People that follow me will see every once in a while, I'll throw it out on Instagram and stuff, because I get into these conversations with people that just start ridiculing me and so forth, just based on the name On the Blue Line. And it's usually people that don't want to have an actual conversation anyway. They're just out on the internet trying to make a name. But you're right. It is the line between civility and anarchy. And that is exactly what we need right now, because we're seeing what anarchy looks like. We're seeing, you know, Chaz Chop and these other, and again, these aren't political statements. These are just, they used to be common sense statements. It used to be like, yeah, we don't like burn police stations. Like that used to be a rule. At least when I grew up, I don't recall anyone saying, hey guys, let's go burn a police station today. But as we go further and further down this road towards anarchy, that clear need for this line, and something I was going to touch on earlier that I really like that you said is, you know, when the tragedy happened and you had to go back and you're wondering, you know, where am I? Am I still part of, is this still an inclusive group that I'm part of with law enforcement? Is it kind of like these once a cop, always a cop? Because, you know, a Marine's always a Marine, that kind of thinking. And I would say it is, because there's something about a person that's willing to put on that badge and willing to put on that uniform every day. And sure, have there been statistically small amounts of officers who have done really bad things and are bad people? Absolutely. But the vast majority of officers, that's not who they are. And there's something about that person, whether they are active, whether they're retired, or whether they've decided to go on and do something different in their lives, that's core to them. They truly embody that service and that desire to protect and serve the public.
You know, we touched on this in various pieces, and maybe this is the good tie-in with it. The thin blue line definitely represents the support network that we need in our law enforcement communities to be able to bond together because of the stresses, because of the horrific things that we've seen. It's not a I watch your back, you watch my back thing. Right. That's not it. And we went to different academies in different states with different standards, but I can guarantee you the same standards exist anywhere you're at in the United States right now. And this professional courtesy that might have existed a couple of decades ago is gone.
Right.
We hold ourselves to higher standards, but at the same time, while holding ourselves to these higher standards, we also support each other, because we realize that we're going to be subjected to witness and experience things that the general public don't want to deal with. That's why they trust us to do this job. That's what's representative of the thin blue line. And to say that there's anything negative about it, I think is just pure ignorance.
I couldn't say it better myself. I agree with you 100%, Travis. So let's go down. So you spent time in law enforcement. From there, you are now working with DOD, doing some different projects and so forth.
Yeah, I work for a private company, so in a defense contractor role. So we make rugged computers, laptops, server equipment, electronics. So get to deal with all the fun tech and still, you know, deal with a lot of the different military programs that I dealt with prior. So it's fun. Yeah.
Very cool. So from there, you decided at some point to start your own business. Let's talk about what that was like.
I'd always wanted, and I've always had this dream of becoming an entrepreneur. Well into, you know, even when I was a law enforcement officer, I was that officer in the station that always had the side hustle going on. Yeah, I had my own T-shirt line. I had, you know, any other way of you know, trying to start a business, but I never took a serious plunge into it. This was kind of that first time where I did, and it was one of those beautiful shower thoughts. I'd been thinking back to when I was in the military, and I just got done shaving, and I was thinking, I'm like, man, shaving in the military sucked. Why did we always dry shave? Because when you go out to the field, you can't bring aerosols. You can't bring some of the creams or gels because they're going to leak everywhere. They're going to explode. You're
Right.
dealing with austere conditions. So I'm like, okay, this problem has existed for as long as our soldiers have needed to shave, and nobody has solved it. Okay, I'm going to solve this issue. And just went back, and if you go back just a couple decades, you know, people never used to use shaving creams and things like that. It's always been shaving soaps, hard puck style soaps that you would work up with a lather with a shaving brush. I'm like, that's it. I need to make a shaving soap that's going to be tolerant to the austere conditions that our soldiers are experiencing. It's going to come in a leak-proof container. If it does melt, that it can resettle and be reused again. And that's what I worked on. And I came up with just that. It's a rugged tactical shaving soap per se. So, if it is a soldier in the field, they can take, and they come in these nice 4-ounce cans. They can open up the can, run a little bit of water in there, lather it up with their hands, and they can comfortably shave.
Okay.
But for the people at home, they can still use the traditional shaving brush and get that good barbershop-like experience right at home.
Very cool. So what was that process like? Because you actually talked about that yours is a little different. You found that there were some other companies out there that weren't doing exactly what you came up with.
Yeah, so shaving soaps have again, they've existed forever. They haven't gone away. I think a vast majority of people have transitioned out of, just convenience to shaving creams and aerosols. Shaving soaps have been around. And in the artisanal and the artisan community, there's a lot of tallow-based or other oil-based soaps that just wouldn't work in this situation. So, and there are some amazing artisan soaps out there, but if those were subjected to the conditions our soldiers are in, they're gonna break apart and they're gonna become ruined. So yeah, the big difference, this is, it's a glycerin based soap. So if it does heat up past the 150-degree melting point, which could potentially happen, especially if you're, in a Humvee in Iraq with no AC,
Right.
once it cools down, it's going to re-solidify and it's going to be just as good as it was before.
Perfect. Very cool. So the name Caisson, for our non-Army guys, where's that come from?
Caissons go rolling along. It's a shout out to the artillery, and the caissons were the wagons that would pull the shells and the powder back in the day. The Army song originally was "When the Caissons Go Rolling Along," which had been now translated to "When the Army Goes Rolling Along."
Right. Very cool. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember it being sung as "When the Caissons Go Rolling Along." So what does the future look like for you, Travis? What's next?
Still rocking and rolling with MILDEF. I will stay there as long as they let me. It's weird getting out of law enforcement. Some of the weirdest things has been just how different things are on the civilian side. You went from a civilian into law enforcement. I went from child to military to law enforcement and never had any freedom as an adult. So I'm kind of new to all of this, but no, things are great at MILDEF. I'm going to continue with the shaving company as far as I can grow with it. It's actually going extremely well. Having just done this for a couple months, the support has been phenomenal, especially through the veteran community and the veteran-owned business community. I'm hopefully just on the verge of closing some contracts with some of the Marine Corps post-exchange systems. So
Good.
this will be stocked in the Marine Corps bases for them, working still in with the Army and trying to get these right into the hands of the soldiers as quick as possible. So just going to continue seeing how far I can take this and enjoying life here and as much as I can in this great state of California.
That's awesome. It will be neat to watch your journey and how it progresses. just quickly on that, you'd mentioned that some of your products actually have a commemorative number and so forth. Can you just tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so anywhere on the logo, the Caisson Shaving logo, if you look at the crossed straight blades, in the handle is the number 252. And also for the shirt that I'm wearing right now, it's a tribute to my field training officer, Officer Jesús Cordova. He was originally with the sheriff's office with me. Just after I left the sheriff's office, he left the sheriff's office and went over to the Nogales Police Officer. And on August 27th, 2018, he was killed in the line of duty. So each can and everything of tied into the Caisson Shaving Company is it has a small tribute to him. I'll also have a new scent variety called Code 4 that'll be coming out at the end of this month. And it's definitely a tribute to law enforcement. Any proceeds past my wholesale cost for this is going to be donated to, number one, the 100 Club of Arizona, and the other half of it will be donated to the Jesús M Cordova Foundation.
Okay, and I'll be sure to link that up as well for the listeners. Let me, in closing, let me ask you one question I ask everybody, kind of like that final takeaway. What is the one takeaway that law enforcement officers can do? Because we talked a lot of different things, but what's the one thing they can do that's going to make a difference in their personal lives?
Stop trying to separate the badge from your personal life. Accept and get the support on both sides of things. I've been married now for 11 years. My wife, we were just dating when I went into the academy. She's been through thick and thin with me. And I never separated anything from her. She had experienced all of the problems that I brought in from the street, but it was her support that helped me through a lot of this. It's okay to shed away that shell or that bubble that we create, and let some people into your lives to help deal with some of the stuff that you got on your shoulders.
That's awesome. And you're absolutely correct. How can people connect with you?
Facebook, either through my personal account, definitely, open to anybody that wants to reach out, or the business account, facebook.com/Caisson Shaving. I'm on Instagram as well, Caisson_shaving. Or, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn as well. And I think that's how we had originally linked.
It is. That's how we connected. And I'll be sure to link all that up in the show notes. Travis, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Mike.